The night covered Chicago with a thick blanket of fog when Mike Parker, a 34-year-old analyst at one of the largest investment funds on Michigan Avenue, emerged from the glass office lobby for the last time. At 1:30 in the morning, the city breathed only the hum of the trams and the occasional footsteps of passers-by hurrying to the subway. Mike checked the clock on his phone. There were 7 minutes left until the last train, and he rushed down the steps. But Adler Station greeted him with emptiness. Not a single passenger, just the rustle of ventilation and the dim glow of lamps. He was heading towards the scoreboard when a silhouette of a man flashed by in the corner of the tunnel. A light flash of a flashlight on his clothes, and a quiet click. At that moment Mike realized that he was not alone, but it was already too late. His last exhale in a video message recorded on the platform was interrupted by the code M-314, painted in chalk on a concrete wall. In the morning, Mike's parents, Linda and Tom Parker, found an empty apartment in North Lincoln Park. The keys were on the table, and the phone and bag were missing. Mom called 911 in a panic, but the dispatcher reassured her, "Sometimes people leave without warning. Let's give him a day or two." But Linda's heart was squeezed by the message that her son never hid his phone and always called his parents out of habit. 8 hours later, without any news, they contacted the police station of the 18th District. Detective Emma Ross, a veteran of the Missing Persons Department, immediately noted an alarming factor. A year ago, a young policeman disappeared in the same tunnel of the Adler Station, and the same code, M-314, was fixed on the wall. 7 years ago, a lone artist disappeared under the Project Stadium station with identical clean graffiti. Emma looked at the dossier. All the numbers and the letter M matched. 3 cases had already been completed. On the second day, the police examined the footage from the CTA cameras. Mike seemed to be walking towards the edge of the platform, but a moment before the train entered, he stopped, turned to a dark corner, listened attentively and turned his head. There was not a single soul around, but the lens detected the flashing of a line of a jacket. The pulse of Mike's office phone route froze right there, in an area where no official stairs led. Detective Ross is going to the Parker family. In a house in the suburb of Evanston, parents cried over an empty dish on the table. Linda told me, there wasn't a single liar in him, he would have called. I know him. Tom, a Marine veteran, clutched a frame with his son's young face. He didn't ask for anything personal, he always helped others. Why would anyone want to erase him from their lives? Emma nodded. We'll bring him home, Madam Parker. I promise. On the third day, the inscription, M-314, appeared in the entrance of their condominium, scratched into the entrance mirror. There's also a drop of dark liquid that looks like blood. Linda posted an alarming post on Facebook with trembling fingers, and the neighbors received a notification. They looked out the windows fearfully, not understanding what was going on. While the family was gathering volunteers to post flyers around the city, Emma and the criminologists arrived at Adler Station. There, in the underground passages, behind a concrete wall, they found an underground maintenance corridor. Dusty rails led to an old warehouse near the shore of Lake Michigan. The stairs behind the bars gaped with holes in the rungs, and at the bottom a single flashlight flickered on, as if someone was still in a hurry. The detective went down into the semi-darkness, clutched a flashlight in her hand and stopped at a stack of sagging boxes. There was a piece of clothing in each of them, all men's sizes, but quickly faded with age. Among the newspaper scraps was a clipping about Mike. His photo was placed next to the headlines, "Spotted immersed in phone at night." His electronic fitness tracker bracelet was lying on the table, which fell at exactly the same time as he disappeared. Emma felt that the walls of the warehouse were looking at her with opaque eyes of darkness. Drops of water began to patter somewhere in the distance. She received a message, "Find the key." Below, under the concrete, there was an old iron press lock with a combination lock. It is engraved with M-314, but how to open it? After listening to the call in her own heart, Ross turned the handle from left to right, then squeezed out the key plate, and the door creaked softly. Behind it was a tiny room, a concrete floor, one window barred with rusty steel, and a plastic mattress. Mike's battered backpack was on the mattress. His speech, recorded on a dictaphone, lay on the pillow. But Mike himself wasn't there. The air smelled of bitterness and alcohol. Emma's heart ached. He could have been in any of those cells. She picked up the recorder, listening to whispers. There were fragments of voices, fragmentary puffing, and the numbers 314 on the recording. Then a soft "sorry" and the sound of dripping water. The scream was lost in the echo. Ross realized that Mike was here, and he was forbidden to call for help. After returning to the station, she transferred the search to the area of the port warehouses. There, along the eastern shore, stood the abandoned man-killed park complex. Graffiti artists often came here, and the walls were covered with symbols and numbers. On a dry, dusty alley, the detective saw not M-314, but 314M, a mirror image. Human footprints gathered along the edge of the inscription, dirt, paint, and drops of someone else's blood. Ross called for backup, a SWAT team and a dog handler. Suddenly, the connection with the remote control breaks down. Someone interrupted the signal. There is only a rustle in the silence. A man in a black jacket stepped out of the shadows. It was Mike's colleague from the bank, Mark Roberts, who disappeared 3 years ago. His cheeks were sunken, his eyes were dull, and his lips were whispering one word: sorry. Mark raised his hand, holding in it a plastic card with an engraved code. The date was exactly at midnight on the docks, where the game started. Breaking through the crowd, Emma rushed to the gathered people, but Mark disappeared into the black hole of the warehouse. Only in the nervous twitching of the light was a clearly outlined silhouette revealed. Nothing captured the horrors completely. On the 30th day, a summons came to the Parker house. The body was found. On land and on the water of the port berths, workers came across a pit filled with cement, with ossified remains inside. The police called. On the spot, Emma saw that it was Mike. A bruise from handcuffs was showing on his bones, and there were chain prints on his fingers. There was a rope mark on his neck. Behind him is a notebook attached to the steering wheel, with the code M-314 stamped on it and 3 words, "Freedom for a price." An R was stamped in a separate letter, and Ross realized that this was not just a criminal, but someone playing with lives according to the rules of their own sect. The funeral was quiet. The Parker family saw their son for the last time. A sarcophagus made of black granite was placed on the grave, and M-314 was engraved on it, a symbol that turned into a family sorrow. There was a drop of parental tears under each letter and number. After completing the case, Detective Ross left the police station. Her last step is a photograph of the warehouse wall, where instead of M-314, someone managed to add 7 and pinch. Emma's gaze rested on these symbols. Understanding squeezed her chest. The rules of the game continued to apply, and the new code promised the next round. Fog has settled over Chicago again. Neon lights reflected in the wet paving stones, and somewhere in the shadow of another warehouse loomed a silhouette. M-314 turned into an invitation to a deadly dance. Any passerby who stopped for too long could recognize himself in the frozen size of the disappeared analyst. No one is immune from the fact that someone will erase you from the world according to their ruthless code. A thick fog hung over Chicago again, covering the night cover of streets and warehouses with a dense wall. 3 months have passed since Detective Emma Ross left the police department and left her name under the wording, "It is not possible to identify." It seemed that the code M-314 had exhausted itself, shed light on the death of Michael Parker, and disappeared into the dust of old hangars. But in fact, the game has just started a new round. Chapter 1. In mid-November, when the cold first touched Emma's windows, a stranger appeared on her doorstep. A business guy in his 30s in a dark coat and gray scarf handed over a shoe mat and sat down without asking permission. "Detective Ross? My name is Gabriel Stokes. I'm a journalist for Chicago Enigma. You were investigating Parker's disappearance. I'm sure you know that he's not the only victim of the M-314. In his hand was a package with a jet-black seal, as if swallowed by a shadow. Emma glanced at the envelope. There were no postage stamps, no stamps, just her name and the strange inscription, "Remember A7." She nodded and wiped the decrepit table with her palm. I've heard rumors. M-314 surfaced back in the 17th year. People just disappeared, without cameras, without memory, as if disappearing into thin air. But according to police law, a case is opened only once every 10 years. And we can walk hundreds of streets and not find a single landfill with precipitation, Stokes chuckled, handing over the letter. Here it is for you. The mixture of old printing ink and fresh bitumen smelled hopeless, as if the letter had been written between explosions. On the envelope is written, 7, and under it in small letters, next weekend, Avers Station, Platform 2. No more details. Chapter 2. Avers Station, Platform 2. In the pre-dawn hour, Emma reached the station where the train had not yet been scheduled. The Avers platform on the Green Line was abandoned about 10 years ago. There were holes in the ceiling, cans were lying under the seats, and the lights were flashing as if they were being watched. The muffled noise of the L trains in the distance resembled a pulse desperately trying to keep the city alive. Following the directions of the letter, the detective went to the far corner of the wall, where the concrete had been cleared of graffiti. The place remained white, icy, like an invisible handprint. Emma crouched down and ran her finger along the line scratched in the paint. 7. However, a new inscription flickered just below, barely visible in the light of the lantern, X13. My phone rang in my pocket. A surveillance camera photo came in, taken during the day. A tall figure in a black coat stood on the platform, and next to it was the silhouette of a young man with a tracker bracelet. Nothing superfluous, just a black and white grain of static. The girl in the coat turned her head towards the camera as if she knew she was being filmed, but she didn't resist. Below the photo are the coordinates of the warehouse yard off Roosevelt Road. Emma wrote everything down in a black notebook and walked out of the tunnel into the damp morning air. The heavy clouds wafted with the scent of the lake, and her footsteps echoed in the puddles like the echo of someone else's premonitions. Chapter 3. An abandoned warehouse on Roosevelt Road. In the semi-darkness of the courtyard stood rusty containers, broken glass and a hastily welded gate. The door was broken for about 10 minutes, the roar of copper coils, the screech of bolts, and Emma went inside. There are dirty sole prints all over the floor, and a charred hook from a crane beam in the corner. The walls were covered with writing, X13, 7, M-314, R711. Dots, dashes, and crossed out words are torn from someone's memory. She put on gloves and walked around the room, noticing one phrase in each piece of paper: the price is freedom. Not a vote, not a ransom demand. Everything was based on ritual. The old plywood creaked underfoot, and the detective found the letter R on it. Crouching down, she saw a fresh drop of something sticky underneath. With her fingers, she transferred a drop to a piece of cotton wool, then identified, it's not blood, but something chemical, like dental fillings. Then an old speaker without a case started banging in the corner, and out of the silence I heard, "Help me." Emma shuddered and turned on the flashlight brighter. On the other wall, on old plywood, a silhouette appeared in chalk, the outline of a girl with short hair, shoulders hunched, and diagonally, X13. Right under the drawing is a khaki sweatshirt and a severed ear on the floor, black with mold. She recoiled, but the corner of her mouth twisted into a slightly confident squint. It's too late. Footsteps behind him. My heart leapt into my throat. She snatched out her brush and leaned on it, turning around. There were two people standing there, a tall woman in a pencil skirt and a faceless man in a stained jacket. They silently spread their fingers, showing the X13. Their lips were trembling, but there were no sounds. Emma threw a flashlight at them and ran for the exit. The door slammed shut behind her, and their indifferent laughter echoed. Chapter 4. A new victim at dawn. The newspapers wrote about a girl found in Water Tower Park, half-naked, in shaky actor's makeup, with X-13 scrawled on her shoulder and 7 in chalk. Her name is Sarah Huntington, a student at the University of Illinois who studies urban legend folklore. Only the neighbors are shocked. She was always funny, loved comics and talked about urban myths. By evening, Sarah had died from complications of hypothermia and dehydration. Emma looked at her photo in the morgue. The girl's face was frozen in a smile, as if she was going on a date. There were blue rope marks on his fingers, and a small rash on his neck from a burn from a briefcase rim. There is a punctured hole in the auricle, as if a microphone had been inserted there. She bit her lip. From now on, there was no doubt, this was not a lone killer. It's a system. Chapter 5. After the funeral of Sarah Parker, the Chicago dungeons once again received their difficult status as the family of those who died at the hands of a new, elusive sectarian. But in fact, the M-314 network had grown. Now it included a 7 as an entry channel, X-13 as an exit channel, and R-711 as an afterlife channel. But the latter had not yet been fixed, which meant that it was possible to expose the branches of this game before the R-711 channel was fully operational. Emma made an agreement with a local urban historian. He led her through underground passages that are hundreds of years old, but which still connect old warehouses, the subway, and abandoned bomb shelters during the Cold War. In the narrow tunnel, she saw a new inscription, 3 symbols at once, M-314, 7, and X-13, applied to the concrete above the ventilation duct that had been dug through. Men's shoes sparkled under the canal. Someone got out, leaving mud, and left this place forever. In the fallen grate, someone had fixed the old passport of a Russian citizen from Zarabich, who disappeared in 2003. Everything matched, the same cipher, M-314. Emma realized that this game has been alive for at least 20 years. This means that the clues are in the past, in the archive, in the forgotten police cases and the stories of urban folklorists. Chapter 6. Archives of the Past. A research friend from the University of Chicago, Dr. Iris Lang, has been digging through the archives since 1910. She sent Emma lists of those who had disappeared without a trace at railway stations and old ports. In the 20th century, the M-314 codes were not written in chalk, but Malaville 314 was found engraved on the joints of the rails, the name of the car that was torn apart by chemical bombing during the First World War. Then there is a 7 as the designation of Military Chemical Depot No. 7 in the suburbs, X-13 as the code for a closed stage camp for prisoners of war. Washington and Los Angeles also had copies of these signs, but they were discontinued in 1924 after the last victim died without explanation. Emma clenched her fist, looking at the recording. So they've been going on with this scenario for centuries. Not for lust, not for money. For what? What is it? She asked herself. Chapter 7. The series of new codes was in December. Emma woke up to every sound of the city subway, to the howl of the sculptural L trams, to the hum of distant trains. She could no longer sit idly by. Every night she checked the cameras, looked for unfamiliar silhouettes in her coat, checked every stutter of the punch. And so a letter came to her email from L Network, an anonymous forum for tractor drivers and subway drivers. Attention. Next week, you will find the code E911 in the area of Montrose Station. According to the rules, save or be saved. It was a premonition. A man who threatens others is running away with his last breath of hope. The Montrose Station itself was located under the old warehouses of a distillery, long abandoned. E911 is the rescue code? But there are no rules in their system, only scripts. Chapter 8. The last act. On a frosty night, Emma stood on the Montrose platform, alone. In the headphones, there is a recording of a 911 alarm call from an unknown woman. Help. I'm in the tunnel. My hands are getting weak. The call ended. Emma took out a flashlight, pushed through the closed doors, and descended the old steps into the gloom. There, in the old tunnel, someone's footsteps echoed. She stepped towards the sound and saw that the inscription, E911, had appeared on the walls with new chalk. Below is a black handwriting, "Whoever kills the code will save me." Clay creaked and chalk fell underfoot. Emma touched the letter E, the beginning of an icy chill spread down her neck. Then a lock clicked nearby, and the tunnel walls seemed to vibrate. At that moment, a shadow flashed by in the light of the lantern. Her fingers were wrapped in a white gauze bandage. Emma took a step towards her. "Who are you? What do you need?" The woman just shook her head and sang in a strange voice. "No light te bastards carborunderum." 3 words forgotten by other languages. Emma recoiled. It was the Latin surgic of combat transcripts, "Don't let the bastards break you." For a second, something familiar flashed in her eyes, Michael Parker. "Help me," the woman said faintly, and disappeared into the light like a shadow in a candle flame. Silence deafened the tunnel. All that remained on the wall was the code, E911, and a drop of unknown liquid. Emma put her palm on the cold concrete and realized that she had accepted the challenge. It was the last act. Epilogue: in the morning, the city woke up in the snow. The Montrose platform was a shapeless pile of cotton wool. The trains rustled along the rails, the unknown, E911, was no longer visible. But Emma's smartphones lit up with a notification without a name, a message from a black envelope. "Whoever saves this code will save us all. A7. X13. Art711. M-314. E911. D007. Keep going."